The wooden gavel cracked down with a sharp bang that echoed off the paneled walls. The courtroom fell silent. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the air inside felt heavy stale with tension, thick with judgment. 10 years, the judge declared, his voice low but carrying authority that left no space for reply. The words struck like a hammer. Murmurs rippled through the packed gallery. A man in a navy blue suit sat motionless at the defense table, his broad shoulders squared, his eyes fixed on the bench. To the casual observer, he looked like any other defendant, a black man, young, sharply dressed, but sitting under the shadow of power. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. A few raised their phones. Red recording lights blinked in the dim courtroom. Then he stood, slowly, calmly. His chair scraped against the marble floor with a sound that seemed to cut the silence in half. Gasps filled the room. The bailiff moved instinctively toward him, hand brushing the holster at his side. But the man didn't run, didn't plead. He reached into his jacket pocket, withdrew a small leather case, and with a practiced flick of his wrist, snapped it open. The golden emblem inside caught the overhead light shining against the dark wood and polished brass fixtures. He raised it high, eyes locked on the judge. "How about now?" His voice carried across the chamber, deep and steady. For a moment, no one moved. The judge, silver-haired and stern, blinked as if the ground had shifted beneath his feet. His grip tightened on the gavel. He had just condemned this man to a decade behind bars. Yet now, staring at the badge gleaming inches away, the words stuck in his throat. From the back row, a spectator whispered too loudly, "Wait, he's not a defendant?" Another voice answered, "Is this real? Somebody record this." Phones lifted higher. A TikTok live notification pinged. Within seconds, the incident was streaming beyond the walls of that courtroom. The man lowered the badge just enough for the entire gallery to see. Federal Prosecutor, lead counsel for the state's most high-profile cases. His presence here wasn't as a defendant, it was as the very person tasked with upholding justice. The judge's jaw tightened. His robe, immaculate under the fluorescent lights, suddenly looked less like a shield of authority and more like a costume stripped of its power. "You just sentenced a prosecutor," the man continued, voice calm but edged with steel. "And not just any prosecutor, the one overseeing this district." The gallery erupted. Some people gasped, others laughed in disbelief. A woman in the second row muttered, "No way, that can't be true." Her friend, already live streaming, replied, "It's real. Look at the badge. Look at his face." The clock ticked to 2:48 p.m. The moment had become more than a trial. It was theater, scandal, and revelation all unfolding live. The judge tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "There. Must be some mistake." The prosecutor stepped closer, closing the space between them. "The mistake," he said evenly, "was assuming that the color of my skin told you everything you needed to know." Behind him, the gallery leaned forward, drawn by the gravity of the confrontation. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, the only sound besides the whir of phones recording. This was no longer just a case. It was a public reckoning, and the silence that followed was deafening. The tension in the chamber didn't dissolve after the badge appeared, it thickened. The fluorescent lights hummed above, the sound eerily steady against the uneven rhythm of whispered voices. What had begun as just another sentencing hearing had now turned into something else entirely, a mirror reflecting the assumptions that lived inside this room. The judge, a man in his late 50s with carefully combed silver hair, adjusted his robe as though the weight of the fabric might restore his authority. He'd been on the bench for nearly 2 decades, his reputation built on efficiency and stern control. To him, the sight of a young black man at the defense table fit a script he'd seen 100 times. Suits didn't matter. Confidence didn't matter. In his mind, the role was already assigned, defendant. The man in the navy suit stood taller now, shoulders squared, his presence commanding the space in ways the robe no longer could. His tie was a deep burgundy, the knot tight, not a crease out of place. His voice moments earlier had been calm, but the words carried weight, too much weight to be dismissed as theatrics. From the gallery, the audience shifted in their seats. A college student in the back row whispered to her friend, "He looks like every lawyer I've ever seen on TV. Why did the judge think he was a defendant?" Her friend shrugged, phone held high, already live streaming to hundreds of viewers. Closer to the front, an older man in a brown tweed jacket muttered, "Figures, Doesn't matter how sharp they dress, some people always get mistaken. His words carried the tired tone of someone who had seen it happen before. The woman beside him shot him a sharp look, but she didn't disagree. Even the bailiff hesitated, his hand still hovering near his holster but not moving forward. He was caught between training and instinct. Training told him to obey the judge. Instinct told him something here was very, very wrong. This wasn't just about one judge and one prosecutor. This was about the culture of the courtroom itself. The layout reinforced hierarchy. The judge elevated on the bench, lawyers positioned below, defendants seated even lower, shackled by perception before a word was spoken. Authority wasn't just enforced by law, it was staged by design. And in that stage play, certain roles had long been typecast. The prosecutor's calm presence challenged that entire framework. He didn't slouch. He didn't look away. He held his badge in one hand like an anchor, refusing to let it drop until the truth registered in every corner of the room. His posture alone said, "I belong here, more than you realize." A woman in the third row leaned toward her neighbor, whispering with disbelief, "Is this some kind of stunt? Like a TV show?" Her neighbor shook his head, eyes fixed on the scene. "That's real. You can't fake a badge like that. Not in federal court." The judge cleared his throat, his voice unsteady now. "This is highly irregular," he said, but the words didn't land with the same authority as before. The robe, the gavel, the elevated bench, all of it felt suddenly smaller against the weight of a single man's truth. For years, stories like this had simmered beneath the surface. Quiet conversations in hallways, whispered warnings between young attorneys of color. Don't give them a reason to doubt you. Don't let your suit wrinkle. Don't speak too loudly or too softly. Don't forget you're being judged the moment you walk in. And here it was, playing out on the public stage. A man who had dedicated his career to enforcing the law, reduced in a heartbeat to a stereotype. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. A teenager in the back pulled out his phone and muttered to his friends, "This is going viral. No way people aren't clipping this." His prediction wasn't wrong. Notifications buzzed as clips already began spreading online, captioned with words like, "Justice turned upside down and courtroom bias caught on camera." The clock above the bench ticked toward 2:52 p.m. Just 5 minutes had passed since the sentence was spoken, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Every person in the room could feel it. The prosecutor finally lowered the badge, sliding it carefully back into his inner pocket. He didn't need to hold it up anymore. The silence in the room proved its power had already landed. His voice was steady as he said, "I'm not here as a defendant. I'm here as the chief prosecutor of this district, and I just watched justice nearly fail in front of all of you." The gallery gasped again, a sound like air sucked from the room. Even those who had doubted a moment earlier now stared in stunned recognition. For the judge, it was a moment of exposure, not just of one mistake, but of an entire system of assumptions that had gone unchecked for far too long. And for everyone watching inside the courtroom and on thousands of screens beyond, it was the beginning of a reckoning. The silence broke when the bailiff finally stepped forward. His polished shoes echoed on the marble floor, each step deliberate. His hand hovered close to his duty belt, not quite on the weapon, but close enough to draw every eye in the gallery. "Sir," he said, voice firm but edged with doubt, "I'm going to need you to sit back down. Right now." The prosecutor didn't flinch. His posture remained steady, calm but immovable, as though he'd been preparing for this moment long before stepping into the courtroom. "I'm standing," he replied evenly, "because justice is standing with me." A ripple ran through the gallery, some scoffing, others murmuring in support. Phones lifted higher. By now, more than a dozen glowing screens dotted the audience, like tiny spotlights capturing every angle. The judge seized on the bailiff's command, eager to reclaim authority. "Yes," he barked, gavel striking wood again. "Officer, remove him if he refuses to comply." The order landed hard. Gasps swept across the room. The idea of dragging a man in a tailored suit badge still gleaming in his breast pocket seemed surreal. But hierarchy was hierarchy. The judge gave orders. The bailiff enforced them. That was the system. "Sir," the bailiff repeated, lowering his voice just enough that only those in the front rows could hear. "Don't make this harder. Let's step outside and sort this out." It was the classic tactic. Contain the disruption, move it away from public view, handle it quietly in the shadows where no one could record. But this time, the shadows were gone. The cameras saw everything. The prosecutor's eyes flicked briefly toward the glowing clock above the bench. 2:55 p.m. Less than 10 minutes since the judge's harsh sentence, and already the narrative had flipped. His voice was calm, steady, deliberate. "I will not step outside," he said, "because the problem isn't out there. It's right here." The bailiff froze, torn between duty and conscience. Behind him, the whispers grew into open commentary. "He's right. Why are they trying to remove him? Isn't this supposed to be his courtroom?" The tension was no longer confined to the bench and the table below. It filled every corner, every pew, every phone screen, streaming the drama live to an audience far beyond these walls. The judge's gavel struck again, louder this time. "Remove him now." But the bailiff hesitated. And in that hesitation, the room felt the crack, the first real fracture in the authority that had ruled unquestioned only minutes earlier. The bailiff's hesitation lasted only seconds, but it felt like an eternity under the courtroom lights. His eyes flicked to the gallery, then back to the judge, waiting for clarity that wasn't coming. That pause gave space for someone else to act. From the prosecution table, a young associate attorney, barely 30, sharp gray suit, slightly too big for his frame, rose to his feet. "Your Honor," he began, voice cracking at first, "there may be a mistake here." The judge's eyes narrowed. "Sit down, counselor. This court doesn't tolerate disruptions." "But, sir," the young attorney pressed, louder this time, "I recognize him. That man isn't a defendant. He's—" "Enough!" The gavel struck like thunder, cutting him off. The sound reverberated through the chamber, but it no longer carried the same weight. It was noise, not authority. From the gallery, the murmurs swelled into open conversation. A college student muttered to her phone camera, "Y'all, this is insane. They just tried to sentence the prosecutor himself." Her live stream comments scrolled so quickly she couldn't keep up. "No way. Get his name. This judge is done." At the back of the courtroom, a man in a denim jacket whispered to his partner, "This is history. You don't see systems collapse in real time very often." The bailiff cleared his throat, still torn. "Your Honor, maybe we should confirm his credentials before—" His voice trailed off under the judge's glare. But even that half-sentence was enough. The gallery erupted. "Yeah, check the badge. Why won't you look at it? Stop pretending you didn't see." The judge slammed the gavel again, face flushed. "Order in the court." But the room wasn't listening. The courtroom had transformed into something else entirely, a public tribunal, each phone camera a witness, each live stream comment a verdict. The prosecutor finally spoke again, his voice calm but cutting through the chaos. "Your Honor, you had every opportunity to ask who I was. You didn't. You assumed. And now, the truth is no longer yours to contain, it belongs to everyone watching." The gallery erupted in gasps and nods. A woman near the aisle stood, pointing her phone directly at the bench. "We're live right now, Judge. Tens of thousands of people are watching. You can't bury this." The judge's face stiffened. He adjusted his robe, as if pulling it tighter could restore its authority. "This is my courtroom," he said, the words strained. The prosecutor took a single step forward, not threatening, just enough to close the space. His shoes echoed softly on the marble floor. "No, Your Honor," he said. "This is the people's courtroom, and they're watching, every word, every decision." The gallery roared with approval. Even those who had doubted minutes earlier were now clapping, some shouting support, others chanting his name as if he were a public defender for the entire room. On the live stream, hashtags exploded. Number courtroom bias climbed into trending lists. Screenshots spread across Twitter and Instagram. Within minutes, local journalists were retweeting the footage, labeling it unprecedented. The clock above the bench ticked to 3:02 p.m. Just 15 minutes after the gavel had fallen with a harsh sentence, the courtroom had turned into something no one had expected, a stage for justice to fight for itself. And the fight was only just beginning. The noise in the gallery swelled until it felt like the walls themselves might crack under the weight of it. The judge's gavel struck again and again, but the echo no longer carried control. Every sound was met with defiance, with voices refusing to quiet. Finally, the prosecutor slipped his hand into his jacket pocket and withdrew the badge once more. This time, he didn't just hold it high, he walked toward the bench, each step steady, each step watched by a dozen recording lenses. He placed the badge on the clerk's desk, the gold seal gleaming under the harsh fluorescent light. Beside it, he set down his official identification card, laminated edges catching the glow. "My name," he said, his voice level but resonant, "is Marcus Reed, Chief Prosecutor of this district. And this," he tapped the badge lightly, "is proof." Gasps rippled through the room. A man in the third row muttered, "There it is. Hard evidence. Let's see the judge deny that." But deny he did. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing as though squinting could erase the truth in front of him. "Badges can be forged. Documents can be fabricated. Until I have official confirmation, this courtroom will not be hijacked by theatrics." The words landed like another blow. The gallery erupted in protest. "You've got to be kidding me. Look at the photo on the ID. It's him. Why won't you admit what's right in front of your face?" The clerk hesitated, caught between loyalty to the bench and the truth glittering inches away. She reached for the card, turning it over, checking the embedded hologram, the microprint, the scannable barcode. Everything looked official, too official to be fake. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Your Honor, this appears legitimate." The judge cut her off, voice sharp. "Appearances are not evidence. Call Chambers. Verify his status immediately." The clerk froze, then lifted the courtroom phone with unsteady hands. The dial tone buzzed in the heavy air. Each beep of the keypad felt like another tick of the clock counting down to the inevitable. 3:07 p.m. The live streamers caught every detail. The way the clerk's fingers shook, the way the judge's face reddened, the way the prosecutor stood motionless, unyielding. Marcus Reed didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calm was louder than anger. "Call whoever you like," he said. "But the truth doesn't wait for permission." End of 48. And with that, the room seemed to hold its breath, suspended between denial and revelation, every eye fixed on the phone pressed to the clerk's ear. The clerk's voice trembled as she spoke into the receiver. "This is courtroom 3. Yes, Your Honor is presiding. We need immediate confirmation on Marcus Reed's status." Every syllable felt like it echoed into eternity. The gallery had gone strangely quiet, anticipation settling over the room like fog. Dozens of phones stayed raised, capturing the clerk's nervous fingers twisting the cord, the judge's tight jaw, the prosecutor's steady stance. Then the door at the side of the courtroom opened. A man in a charcoal suit, his tie loosened from a hurried walk, stepped inside. His presence alone shifted the energy. This was Deputy Chief Justice Alan Morris, the judge's own superior within the district hierarchy. The whispers erupted instantly. "That's Morris. He runs oversight. If he's here, something serious is about to go down." The judge straightened, relief flickering across his face. "Justice Morris, I assure you this is a misunderstanding, a disruption I was about to contain." Morris raised a hand, silencing him. "I've been watching the live stream, Harold. His use of the judge's first name landed like a reprimand. Containment isn't what this looks like." The gallery erupted again, half gasp, half cheer. The camera zoomed in, capturing every bead of sweat glistening on the judge's forehead. Marcus Reed remained calm. "Deputy Chief Justice," he said, inclining his head with respect, "thank you for arriving so quickly. As you can see, I was just sentenced as though I were a defendant." Morris studied him carefully, then turned to the clerk. "The call?" The clerk held the receiver against her chest. "Confirmed, sir. District Attorney Marcus Reed, Chief Prosecutor, active status." Her voice cracked on the last word. The reaction was instant. Phones buzzed as comments flooded the streams. "He's real." Judge caught red-handed. "This is career-ending." The judge slammed the gavel again, desperation creeping into his tone. "This is still my courtroom. One badge doesn't override procedure." But the gallery wasn't buying it. From the second row, a retired police officer, his badge still clipped to his belt, stood and spoke loudly. "I worked with Reed last year on a trafficking case. He's the real deal. The only fraud here is pretending you didn't know who he was." Cheers rippled through the crowd. Phones turned toward the officer, capturing his words like testimony in a second trial. Morris's gaze hardened. "This is no longer about order in the court, Harold. This is about credibility, and right now, yours is collapsing in real time." The judge's mouth opened, but no words came. His authority, once absolute, was crumbling under the weight of a single misjudgment. 3:15 p.m. Live stream counters climbed past 78,000 viewers. Hashtags trended nationally, number Justice on Trial and number Marcus Reed. Journalists tweeted screenshots. News alerts pinged phones before the hearing had even adjourned. In the gallery, a young law student whispered to her professor, "They'll be teaching this in classes within a year." The professor nodded grimly. "They'll be rewriting procedure by tomorrow." The prosecutor folded his hands calmly, his voice carrying with quiet finality. "This courtroom doesn't need containment. It needs accountability." The deputy chief justice nodded slowly. And in that nod, the balance of power shifted again this time, unmistakably. The gallery was already buzzing, but when Marcus Reed drew a slow breath and spoke again, the sound alone pulled the room back into silence. "You've heard the confirmation," he said, eyes sweeping across the chamber. "But perhaps you don't yet understand the weight of what that means. I am not just a prosecutor in this district. I am the chief prosecutor, the one entrusted with overseeing every major case that enters these halls. From racketeering to corruption, from organized crime to judicial misconduct, my office leads them all." The words landed like steel on marble. The judge's lips parted, but no sound came. His gavel sat useless in his hand. He had sentenced this man, this authority, to a decade in prison without hesitation. And now, the very foundation of his credibility cracked beneath him. Phones in the gallery shook as viewers tried to capture the moment from every angle. A live streamer's voice trembled as she narrated for her audience. The judge didn't just misidentify him. He nearly condemned the top prosecutor in the state. This is bigger than bias. This is systemic failure. Reed's gaze dropped briefly, his composure still intact, but his tone softened. "Do you know why I chose this career?" he asked, though the question wasn't for the judge alone. It was for everyone. For the jurors, for the gallery, for the tens of thousands watching through glowing screens. "I grew up on the South Side," he continued. "My mother worked 2 jobs. My father never made it home from his 3rd shift one winter night. For years, I watched neighbors pulled into a system that saw them only as numbers on a docket, and I swore, if I ever had the chance, I'd stand inside this room not as the accused, but as the one who could fight to change it." The gallery hushed. Even the cameras seemed to pause, the red lights blinking but steady. "And now," Reed said, his voice rising just enough to carry to the farthest row, "here I stand, not because I broke the law, but because I dared to look like someone you thought belonged in chains instead of in charge." The silence that followed was heavy, almost unbearable. Then applause. It started with one person in the back, hesitant, then spread like fire through the rows. The sound rolled forward, filling the chamber until it drowned even the buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. The judge's hands trembled. He looked not at Reed, but at the cameras, at the hundreds of lenses capturing his humiliation for the world to see. Deputy Chief Justice Morris folded his arms. His expression carried the weight of inevitability. "This will not be forgotten," he said quietly, though the words were picked up by at least 3 different microphones in the room. Reed let the applause wash over him, but his expression remained steady, focused. He wasn't basking in triumph. He was anchoring the room in truth. The twist wasn't just about his title. It was about what it represented, the system's blind spot, caught in the act of sentencing its own guardian. And for everyone watching inside and out, there was no turning away. The applause eventually ebbed, but the tension didn't fade. It grew sharper, honed to a point as Marcus Reed reached into his briefcase, sleek black leather, worn only at the edges from years of use. From inside, he withdrew a folder stamped with the state's seal. The gold embossing glimmered under the overhead lights, unmistakably official. He set it on the clerk's desk, flipped it open, and spread the papers like a dealer revealing the winning hand. "These," Reed said, his voice calm but resonant, "are my letters of appointment, signed by the governor, ratified by the state senate, entered into the public record." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Even the skeptical murmurs that had lingered after the badge now fell silent. The documents were indisputable. Reed lifted one page, holding it up for the gallery and the cameras. The governor's signature flowed across the bottom, thick strokes in black ink. A holographic seal shimmered faintly as the angle shifted. "I want you all to hear this part," Reed said, lowering his voice just enough to draw the room closer. He read aloud, "The Chief Prosecutor shall have oversight of all judicial proceedings in this district, with full authority to review, intervene, and, where necessary, to hold officers of the court accountable for misconduct." He lowered the page, letting the words hang in the air. "That means," he said, eyes locking on the judge, That when you chose to sentence me, you weren't just wrong, you were violating the very statutes you swore to uphold. Ugh. The gallery erupted again, voices overlapping. He read it right from the law. This is over for the judge. History in the making. But the judge wasn't ready to yield. His face reddened, his voice straining as he tried to project authority that no longer held. These papers prove nothing about this proceeding. Anyone could walk in here with a folder and a story. Until the proper chain of verification, Reed cut him off, his tone still calm but edged with steel. Verification? That's what the live stream has become. Thousands of people, fact-checking in real time. By now, half the viewers watching have already pulled these same documents from public archives. This is not a claim, it is law. The live stream counters surged upward 112,000 live viewers and climbing. Screenshots of the documents flooded Twitter, annotated with yellow highlights and bold captions. Legal experts chimed in online, confirming the authenticity. The courtroom was no longer just a chamber. It was a stage, and the audience was the entire nation. The judge leaned forward, gripping the bench as though the wood itself might steady him. "You're twisting procedure into spectacle," he spat. Reed didn't flinch. He placed both hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. "No, Your Honor. You did that the moment you turned prejudice into judgment." The gallery roared again. Phones panned wildly to capture every face, Reed's calm, the judge's unraveling, the Deputy Chief Justice's stony silence. 3:24 p.m. The air was thick, electric. The documents lay spread across the desk like evidence at a trial, except this time, the defendant wasn't the man in the Navy suit. It was the man in the black robe. The weight of the documents lay heavy on the clerk's desk, but heavier still was the silence that followed. It wasn't the respectful hush of a courtroom, it was the pause before collapse, the kind of quiet that comes when people realize history has shifted under their feet. That silence shattered when the rear doors burst open. 3 figures strode in, flanked by court-martials. The first was a woman in a tailored gray suit, her stride quick and commanding general counsel for the state bar. Beside her walked a representative from the Judicial Oversight Committee, his lapel pin gleaming with the federal seal. Trailing them was a senior member of the Ethics Board, briefcase in hand. The gallery gasped. "That's the bar's top lawyer. They brought oversight here? In the middle of a hearing?" Phones turned instantly, capturing the arrivals as though celebrities had stepped onto a red carpet. Live stream comment counts spiked 150,000 and climbing. The judge's face drained of color. He reached for his gavel, but the oversight representative spoke first. "Put that down, Harold. This proceeding has escalated beyond your control." The judge froze, gavel suspended midair. Slowly, he lowered it, the wood striking the desk with a hollow thud that carried no authority. The general counsel's voice cut through the tension. "We've received multiple live feeds, corroborated documents, and now confirmation from the governor's office itself. Chief Prosecutor Marcus Reed is who he says he is, which means this courtroom stands on the verge of collapse, not because of him, but because of you." Murmurs rippled like a wave. The gallery leaned forward, hungry for every word. The ethics board member set his briefcase on the desk, flipping it open to reveal a thick binder. "We are convening an emergency inquiry," he announced. "Right here. Right now." The judge sputtered, his composure unraveling. "This is outrageous. You can't just—" "We can," the oversight representative snapped. Statute 40. 2 grants authority to intervene when a judge's conduct threatens the integrity of proceedings. And integrity is precisely what's under attack. The gallery erupted in cheers. Some clapped, others shouted in agreement, their voices amplified by the microphones of countless phones. Marcus Reed remained still, his presence commanding without theatrics. He spoke only when the room had quieted enough to hear. "This is not about me," he said. "It's about a system that almost swallowed me whole, even when I was the one meant to protect it. If it can happen to me, imagine what happens to those without a badge, without a title, without cameras to prove their truth." The words struck deep. In the second row, a journalist typed furiously, tweeting quotes before Reed had even finished speaking. The headline spread within minutes. "Chief Prosecutor exposes courtroom bias live." News alerts buzzed on smartphones throughout the gallery, each ping layering the reality that the story had already gone national. The general counsel turned toward the gallery. "We will proceed with testimony," she said firmly. "Anyone who witnessed the judge's initial actions will speak now." Hands shot up. An elderly woman stood, voice steady despite her years. "I was here when he passed sentence," she said. No questions asked, no verification, no hesitation. He saw a black man in a suit and decided it meant guilty. The gallery applauded. Another voice rose, a law student, her phone still streaming. "We all saw it. The cameras don't lie. This wasn't a mistake. It was a mindset." The oversight representative nodded gravely. "These statements are entered into record." The judge buried his face in his hand, sweat beading on his forehead. His gavel sat forgotten, a prop without meaning. 3:37 p.m., the live stream counters passed 220,000 live viewers. Hashtags trended worldwide now. Number Justice Exposed. Number Reed vs. the System. Number Courtroom Reckoning. The ethics board member closed his binder with a decisive snap. Until further notice, Judge Harold Langley is suspended from the bench, effective immediately. The gallery erupted into thunderous applause. Reporters sprinted out the side doors to file stories. Phones buzzed with breaking news alerts across the country. And Marcus Reed, still calm, still steady, simply stood in the eye of the storm he had revealed. The declaration of suspension struck like a lightning bolt. For a heartbeat, the courtroom was frozen in stunned silence. Then the sound came an eruption of cheers, applause, shouts that bounced off the wooden panels and climbed toward the ceiling. Phones shook as people tried to capture the moment from every angle. Notifications pinged in rapid bursts. By now, live stream counters ticked past 1 million viewers worldwide. The judge, Harold Langley, sat slumped behind the bench. His robe, once a symbol of authority, now draped like a costume stripped of its meaning. He opened his mouth as though to object, but no words formed. The gavel at his side lay untouched, a relic of power that no longer belonged to him. The general counsel turned toward him, her voice clear and unyielding. "You will vacate this bench immediately. Security will escort you. And before the day is over, a formal notice of suspension will be filed publicly." Langley's shoulders sagged. Slowly, reluctantly, he rose. His chair scraped against the wood, the sound jarring in a room otherwise filled with applause. Two marshals stepped forward, not with aggression but with the quiet finality of procedure. They guided him away from the bench as dozens of cameras followed his every step. The gallery roared with approval. Some stood and clapped, others raised fists in solidarity. One voice shouted above the rest, "This is what accountability looks like." Marcus Reed did not join in the cheers. He stood quietly, his gaze steady, his expression unreadable. When the noise subsided just enough, he spoke into the sea of cameras. "Justice is not a performance. It is a duty. And today this duty nearly failed until the people made sure it didn't." The crowd responded with another wave of applause, louder than before. 3:45 p.m. The live streams captured every angle. The disgraced judge being led out, the chief prosecutor standing resolute, the gallery celebrating. Within minutes, news stations broadcast the footage nationwide. Headlines scrolled across screens. "Judge suspended live on camera after mistaking prosecutor for defendant." For many, it was vindication. For others, a warning. But for everyone watching, inside and far beyond the courtroom, it was proof that even in the most rigid systems, the truth could break through. The courtroom emptied slowly that evening, but the story refused to fade. Within hours, footage of Judge Harold Langley's suspension dominated television broadcasts, online headlines, and social media feeds. Clips from live streams replayed endlessly. The gavel's hollow thud, the badge held aloft, the documents spread like evidence, and the roar of a gallery transformed into a chorus of accountability. By the next morning, hashtags like Number Justice Exposed and Number Reed vs. the System had climbed to the top of global trending lists. News anchors dissected every frame, while legal analysts filled panels with phrases rarely uttered so publicly. Systemic bias, courtroom prejudice, structural reform, a system under review. For the first time in decades, the Judicial Oversight Committee announced an emergency review of courtroom procedures. Their mandate: determine how a sitting judge could misidentify and sentence the chief prosecutor without due process. The investigation widened almost immediately. What began as a single courtroom scandal grew into a systemic audit. Case files were pulled. Past transcripts were combed. Patterns of rushed judgments, disproportionate sentencing, and microaggressions etched into official records came to light. Numbers told the story with brutal clarity. In the past 5 years, defendants of color in Langley's courtroom had received sentences 27% harsher than their peers for comparable charges. Objections from defense counsel were overruled 41% more often. Complaints filed against the bench, buried, dismissed, or ignored. Marcus Reed's ordeal had done what years of quiet statistics could not. It made injustice visible in real time. Reform in motion. Public pressure forced swift change. Within 2 weeks, the state legislature introduced the Courtroom Transparency Act, among its provisions. Asterisk mandatory recording of all sentencing hearings. Asterisk independent verification of judicial conduct every quarter. Asterisk a bias audit, requiring judges to review and reconcile disparities in their ruling. The governor signed the bill in record time, citing the Reed precedent as proof of its necessity. Law schools added the incident to their ethics curriculum under the banner "The Day Justice Was Put on Trial." For young attorneys, it became both a cautionary tale and a rallying cry. Document everything, question assumptions, and never underestimate the power of a single revelation. Echoes of the past. Commentators quickly drew comparisons to other flashpoints in American legal history. In 1931, the Scottsboro Boys case exposed racial prejudice at the heart of jury selection. In 1987, McCleskey v. Kemp revealed statistical evidence of racial disparities in the death penalty, yet failed to shift precedent. In 2020, viral footage of police violence had spurred reform in law enforcement. But this was different. This was not a street encounter or a backroom negotiation. It was the heart of the justice system, a courtroom broadcast live. The optics were undeniable. A man sworn to uphold the law had been treated as though he were beneath it, and the public had witnessed every second. Data speaks. The aftermath carried measurable results. Within a year, complaints against judges rose by 62%, not because misconduct had increased, but because more people felt empowered to report it. Sentencing disparities in the district fell by 35%, monitored closely under the new audit system. Public trust in the courts, measured by statewide surveys, climbed from 44% to 71%. It wasn't perfect, change never was, but the numbers proved something had shifted. The system, once opaque, was now under a spotlight it could no longer escape. Reed's legacy. Marcus Reed rarely spoke of the incident afterward. He returned to his office, continued his cases, and avoided the celebrity that some tried to thrust upon him. Yet his silence carried weight. For many, his restraint was proof that his fight had never been about personal vindication. It had always been about principle. Journalists tried to capture his essence in profiles, a man who carried both the humility of his upbringing and the gravitas of his position. Neighbors described him as reserved, measured. Colleagues called him relentless but fair. To the public, he became a symbol not of perfection, but of possibility. Students wore shirts printed with the words, "How about now?" the phrase he had uttered when he raised his badge. Activists used it as a rallying cry, a question aimed at every institution that misjudged identity before respecting authority. Systemic ripples. Other states followed suit. By the end of the year, 7 legislatures had introduced bills modeled on the Courtroom Transparency Act. Federal committees debated whether national oversight was overdue. International observers, from London to Lagos, cited the Reed precedent as proof of how digital witness phones, live streams, hashtags could pierce even the most fortified walls of tradition. One law review article called it the courtroom live stream revolution, noting that technology had turned the public into both jury and historian. No longer could proceedings hide behind robes and rituals. Justice had acquired an audience too vast to ignore. The human cost. Yet for all the progress, the incident carried scars. Judge Harold Langley resigned within weeks, disgraced and ostracized. Some colleagues defended him, claiming stress or poor judgment. Others quietly distanced themselves, unwilling to be tainted by association. Langley's fall served as a reminder. Systems are made of people, and people carry their prejudices with them into every chamber, every bench, every gavel strike. A turning point. By the anniversary of the incident, commentators called it a watershed moment, a single afternoon that redefined the meaning of accountability in American courts. Some skeptics dismissed it as spectacle, but most agreed. The system had been forced to confront itself in a way it could no longer deny. And at the center of it all stood a man who had been misjudged, mislabeled, and nearly condemned until truth, backed by courage and amplified by technology, reversed the narrative. The echoes of that day still linger not only in transcripts and headlines, but in the memory of everyone who watched it unfold live. A gavel struck, a sentence fell. And then, in a single moment of truth, an entire system was forced to see itself in the mirror. Marcus Reed never sought applause. His words were simple, his actions measured. Yet what he reminded us all is something far greater than one courtroom scandal. He reminded us that justice is fragile, that it depends not only on laws and robes, but on vigilance, on people willing to stand, even when the system demands they sit down. That's why his story matters, because it isn't just his. It belongs to every person who has ever been underestimated, mislabeled, or silenced. It belongs to communities who know too well what it means to be judged before being heard. And it belongs to anyone who believes that sunlight, the truth, exposed, can disinfect even the darkest corners of power. So here's the message. Document everything. Speak up. Don't let silence become complicity. Whether it's in a courtroom, a classroom, or a boardroom, your story has power. And when shared, it can spark change far beyond what you imagine. If this story moved you, share it. Tell someone what you saw here today. And if you've lived through something similar, don't hide it, let it be known. Together, our voices are louder than any gavel. Because in the end, justice isn't just about verdicts or sentences. It's about truth. And truth, once spoken, cannot be silenced.